All right. As I stated, we started off our first night with Kevin Boleyn, who told us the Dene traditional stories, winter stories of the four worlds, first man, first woman, and the twin hero, the hero twins. And so it was very interesting, and always enjoy hearing those stories that are told. And so tonight we have Fred Roland, who is from British Columbia, and I'll allow him to introduce himself here in a few minutes. And so thank you again for joining us for our second night of our Intertribal Storytelling Nights, sponsored by the AIEA. I am Kimberly Dankabigay, and as is custom, I'm just going to introduce myself in my tribal language. So Nawa Kwahat Hatso Mtoya Goigu Masep Chawi na Oklahoma Aimda Kimberly Dankabigay Khan. Again, my name is Kimberly Dankabigay. I am an enrolled member of the Kiowa tribe from Oklahoma. I'm also cattle and Pawnee from the tribes there in Oklahoma as well. And I currently reside in Tucson, Arizona, and I currently sit as the president for the Arizona Indian Education Association. And so, Esther, do you want to introduce yourself? We do have another executive officer on the line.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Give me one moment. Good evening. My name is Esther Nystrom. At a shikedo shidana she Twitter cheat initially. Really gonna bash a chin. Ashihin dashi che. Really gonna dash a nolly. She Esther Nystrom Unisha. Thank you, Kim, and our guest speaker. Thank you for being our intertribal storytelling. I am. And also for public schools program. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have for this evening. So welcome everyone who's on board.
Thank you, Esther. And again, this is our second night, so we're really looking forward to hearing the stories. I just want to quickly go over our next few sessions that we'll be having. This is a 4-part series. As I mentioned, our first session started last night. Tonight is our second session. Next weekend will be our third and fourth session. We're going to have Larold Penal, who is White Mountain Apache. He will be providing some traditional stories next Saturday on February 5th. And the following day on Sunday, February 6th, we will have Emerson John, who is also of the Dene Nation. And so we're looking forward to having our storytellers join us. And so I'm really excited to have Fred with us this evening. And so I am going to allow Fred to introduce himself, and I am going to turn the time over for him. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to provide it in the chat box, and we will address them as soon as we can. And we'll try and allow some time, if we have some time, for Roland to answer any questions you may have at the end of his presentation. So Roland, if you don't mind, just go ahead, and I turn the time over to you.
All right. Can I get the share screen? There we go. Hi. I tape got an asiam then a since Lenny. I clean mount I squail nasiam nasias. I clean on I in a holmoch in a snowet in a Cowichan and a hulk a meanum squall. Anta na huiampton eating a siam and a quanalitum and a snit Fred Roland. He ate in a climate late up in his cook satla in Clement and a Cowichan in tribe. I climate the squall siam. I eat in a siam and a qualmoch and a snowaish. I know I in a spate. I clim on I in a qualmoch. In the snowaish and seat la ash. I know I squall in this and mensch in the tennis and the CM squall. I'm very grateful to be in your Zoom session. We look at again this world of Zoom. It is such an interesting place to be. Sometimes when I'm doing programs, because I do various crafting programs, and the other ones that I do as ethnobotany. So when we look at ethnobotany, it is a little more difficult to look at doing the ethnobotany piece, because a lot of the significance of ethnobotany is using all senses, all 5 senses. Because again, when we look at the ethnobotany, we have to understand the land base of where it is, again, the significance of how those plants coexist. What is the texture of a plant? How does the environment affect that plant? So there's a lot of hands-on things. So when I think about a lot of the programs that we have in our present day of Zoom, we're losing so much of it. Because again, if I take a piece of cedar like this, I will say, can you smell it? Can you taste it? Here, take a bite. And it's so hard because we're in this one dimension that we don't get to have those other 3 senses. So we have what we call in our language, this is how we see things. Here's how I see things. But again, between the relations that we're doing our presentation to, we're missing how does it smell? How does it feel? What does it taste like if you're going to taste something? So in the introduction, I use our Hulkminum language. This is our traditional dialect, one of the dialects of 32 dialects of where we live on Vancouver Island. So we're on the south end of Vancouver Island, and we have the dialect they call Hulkminum. But that language has changed as every other language has changed, through the evolution of contact. So the languages, they'll change quite a bit, because one of the things that we look at is these beautiful little things, and I'm sure everybody has one. We had to find a word for this, because again, in our language, we don't have words for refrigerator, we don't have words for TV, we don't have words for internet. So we have to try make the words change. Telekalapathes. My Sitla, my uncle has that word, telekalapathes. It means language interrupter. So he always says, you don't have this when you're doing your presentation, especially in schools and stuff, because a lot of it is one of the biggest problems we have with these things is because when these things are being in our classrooms, and I find them really difficult to have them in our classrooms, because again, they're always buzzing and making noises. Now when I go to, say, grade 5, grade 6 students, I have to ask the students, can you please turn your phone off? All our young little, we call them shmana, our children, rely on this everywhere. We're losing that connection, to that personal relationship, because now it's this that's taken over. And I always remember my grandpa, I will say, 4 decades ago, he talked about this before it was even our time. He said that we learn everything in every direction, 4 directions. He said, in your time, your teacher's going to become very small with the 4 directions. And I never understood that as a young child. And I was trying to recall that. And then when these things come about, it made sense to me. 4 directions. This is my teacher. When we grew up as children, who was a teacher through a lot of the time we are growing up as children, but the TV. I used to always tell people, you know why we always act real goofy? Because we watched cartoons and we thought we could be Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner and try do all these things that where they were teaching us. A lot of times we're like, go watch TV, go in that room, watch TV. So that was our teacher. Grandpa used to say, 4 directions. You won't be sitting with us anymore. So one of the things I look at when I'm doing classes, especially in our contemporary schools, I always say that we have maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour, if we're lucky, an hour and 45 minutes Now, and I always say it's really hard to keep the attention of many of the students because again, they're so preoccupied with waiting to get back on this thing. And I always share with them, I said, when I was a child growing up with we refer to them as Sitla and Sitla Esh, the grandparents that have passed on to the spirit world. If they were with us, I would refer to them as Sitla and Sitla. But we have to put that Esh at the end to say they are deceased. It's like my late mother. She again would be 10 Ash. But if she was here, she would be 10. If my father was here, he would be Men. But since he's passed, Men Ash. So it changes our whole language to who I am as an orphan now, because now we got to refer to everything different. And in our tribal society, if someone is speaking at a gathering about who I am, they have to remember my grandparents and parents are gone, so they refer to me different. So my traditional name, which now is my legal name, many of us have been banned from holding our legal names, is Huiempton. So now I have a driver's license with Huiempton on my driver's license. And every time I have to show my license, people look at it and go, so what's your name? It's right there on a license. I feel like Cheech and Chong. Yeah, that's me on the license. That's me. But we were so discarded from having our traditional names. Now people are finally recognizing our sort of identity, our true identity. So I look at a lot of these things as I grew up as a child. A lot of the things we learned from our elders, they were geniuses. They were magicians. They were very articulate in how they did things. All tribal societies were like that of Indigenous people. So when I think about those things, and I think about our systems of academia, and a lot of people say, I'm a master or I'm a PhD. And I think about how many of our elders are masters, how many of our elders are PhDs. They did all these things pre-contact and very, very well. They survived through a lot of the stuff that has been brought to them. So I think about these things and I look at it in a way that where I learned what we call Shnawayish, our teaching, from our elders. They would always say, remember, we're the last on this earth. Everything's before us. The Creator has brought all these things, and the two-leggeds are the last ones. And I always ask people this in our contemporary time, how many of you heard the term all my relations? I hear it all the time from different places that I go, and I always ask people, what does that mean to you? And a lot of people say, it's about us as human beings. And I said, well, the way we look at it, if you're saying it in our territory, it means everything around us. Because they were all here before us. We're only the ending of that relationship. The birds, the trees, the water, the air, all this is before us. And if we think about it, we're only a part of it. So when we start to look at a lot of the things that are going on in our relationship to the environment, we're struggling because we're trying to preserve as much as we can. But again, we're looking at the battle of trying to hold on to these things because that is a part of our relationship to survive on the land. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today is looking at, like I say, I always tell students, I have an hour and a half. I always say that when we used to sit with our grandparents, 10 hours was really nothing, to sit there for that long listening to the teachings. So when we look at our timeline, we have to really break it up into smaller fragments, just so we can try to understand, some of the teachings that we're going to bring forward. So it's been an honor to be on your program this evening, and I look forward to keeping in touch with the again, the Education Center Association. But again, today we're talking about, in our language, we call it shpeit. And this is what we refer to as this beautiful thing, cedar. So when I think about tribal societies, and I think about how tribal societies have adapted to the environment around them, I think of all the tribal societies that use material for weaving. And when we look at the material that's being used for weaving, and I look at the intricacy of some of the weaving that our elders have done, and we struggle with it today, because again, we can't see it, or we don't really understand it. And I look at a lot of tribal societies that they're losing those skills, the weaving skills. People don't want it anymore. They'd rather go down to, some big department store and buy stuff instead of trying to make their own pieces. So when we make, gifts for people, we try to use a lot of the natural material that we have around us. And when we look at things like these little roses, a lot of people want us to make those, or they want us to make these. These are like tulips, and these are all just cedar bark. They call it cambium. So the thing I want to share with you today, I'm going to share a couple things. I'm going to share a PowerPoint, and then I'm going to do a video, and then I'm going to actually show you some of the components of the weaving. But I figured that we'll start with this, and we'll see how much time we have. And if people need a break, they can go have a break. But once I start going through the process of it, I always tell students, fasten your seatbelts. We're about to take off. So I'm going to share screen. I'm going to show you a short piece of a video. And then from that piece of the video, it sort of gives you an idea of where this cambium comes from and how that is harvested. Like say, the video is quite a long video, so I'm just going to show you the piece that is sort of connected to what we're talking about today. So this one is what they call the harvesting of the cedar bark. And it's not really the bark, it's actually the inner bark. It's a cambium. So you have the outer bark, the cambium, and then the tree itself. So that sits in the middle. So that's only harvested at a certain time of the year. We get about maybe 6 weeks out of the year to harvest it. But if we look back in the last 3-4 years, the well, turn that thing off. The last 3 or 4 years, the times changed because of our environment change. So we're getting hotter weather earlier and colder weather. So it's changing the way that the trees are reacting. So we're losing a timeline, whereas we would start in maybe May. People are starting in April now to harvest. So it's earlier, and then it cuts off earlier. So we're losing that time because then it gets way too hot, and then everything just goes off with the way the trees are reacting. And in the last 5 years, we're actually losing a lot of the cedar trees, and they're still trying to figure out why it's happening, but a lot of the trees are dying off. And our old people said, because you're cutting the root system off. When you're logging, you're cutting all that connection to all the other relations. And that's the thing that we look at is, Grandpa and him talked about that 4 decades ago. But now scientists are saying, oh yes, the trees talk to each other through the root system. Yeah, well, Grandpa talked about that 40 years ago. You're just catching up now. So that's one of the things that our elders say. It's because there's too many of the root systems being cut out that they're losing that connection and just dying off. It's sort of relative to a lot of things that happen with our our families and our gatherings, when the parents or the grandparents pass away, a lot of people don't continue gathering. We lose that connection. So it's no different than the trees. So I'm going to show a short video. I'll do share screen, and we'll watch a part of this video. And then I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint now and explain more about the photos that we have in the PowerPoint, of the significance of not only the weaving, but the significance of just that one tree in our territory, because we have many, many trees, but that one, a lot of our elders used to say it was the tree of life, because we use everything from the roots to the needles for either crafting or for medicine. So yes, grab your popcorn. We're going to start the first part of it. Okay, share screen, doop. There, boom. Okay, full screen. There we go.
When I take anything from the land, I prepare it before I take it right out of the woods. I don't bring it home and clean it. I clean it right out there, because I strongly believe in only taking what you need. You don't take more than you have to, because you just don't do that. And I have always gone out there and had in my mind and in my heart that I wasn't going to abuse the gifts that were coming from the land. So that's, some people do that, some people don't, but that's the choice that I make. I think that is probably why weaving has stayed with me as long as it has, because I have such a different, a lot of weavers are like this, I guess, who respect.
Some of the students had the opportunity to collect the cedar, which was a great experience for them. And then to also, after the harvesting, and to take the bark and learn how to care for it, because they've seen examples of how people had not taken care of the bark or had not processed the bark properly. So we've had bark where they folded it, and it gives you a good example of why not to fold it. Because when you start to weave with it, then you have nothing but broken pieces. Not to roll it tight and then put it in a plastic bag, because then everything gets moldy. So I think these essential teachings, the core teachings that were shared within this time, are beneficial for everybody to learn.
Some of the history actually with the blankets and with the weaving is that I read it in a book actually. Was that the weavers a long time ago were chosen by the older ones who was going to receive those gifts with the weaving. You weren't allowed to just go and sit and weave if you wanted to when you were growing up. It was your grandmothers that chose who was going to do it. And what it says in there is that if you were a weaver back in those days, you didn't have to do the domestic things that other women had to do, like chop wood and cook and clean up. Well, my cousin said that she witnessed it with her sister who wanted to learn, and her grandma said, no, it's not for you. It's meant for somebody else. And she ended up, my cousin ended up being the one to learn, and not her older sister. So that's really interesting, because it's our older people who guide and nurture us in where we're going in life. The biggest lesson that I've learned with this work is to recognize my own emotional competence. Whether I'm having a good day or a bad day, it showed me how to move forward from those places with the goodness and with the struggles. Shows you your struggles when you're working with your hands, and it helps you to have a better relationship with who you are, so that you can move on, you can carry on, and things are possible. My great grandmothers, we spent a lot of time with them as a baby and as a little girl, and a lot of the teachings that came from them were probably what kind of guided me in this path where I am today. That the teachings and the way that I was raised in my family has kind of guided me to follow that cultural part of who we are. But it was quite an experience. It was an honor to work with all the ladies there, because one of the biggest things that happens for me when I facilitate a workshop is that the excitement that people get when they're getting ready to learn how to make a hat. You can see it in their eyes that they really, really have a passion for it. And I saw it in everyone that participated in this workshop. I think those are the best classes to facilitate, are the people who have that eagerness and that will to want to learn how to create. Creativity is a good thing. It really helps you to grow. The First Nations people automatically do things in a really slow manner. So when some of the ladies were trying to go really fast with their hands and they're working, I was like, slow down, just back up a little bit. And then they would drop their hands. And I was just like, oh no, did I say that wrong? Because there's no right way or wrong way to do something. I had to kind of adjust to doing things quick, and they had to adjust to doing things slower.
Found out about some things about myself. My thoughts in my head was racing far ahead than my hands were. And so, it really took me a little bit of time to totally just slow myself down and to just concentrate on what was in front of me. I think that if I took anything away from this session, that's basically it, and not to measure my work with anyone else's, that this is something unique to me and my maybe whatever skills that I have or things that I can share through songs and prayer. Just leave it at that.
I think something happens to the traumatized brain that makes it hard to just take pleasure in a raindrop falling on a leaf or.
So that video was done, geez, almost eight years ago. Maria Sampson, she was actually one of the first teachers I've sat with. Like I said, I used to harvest a lot of bark for my grandma and them, but I never got to do the weaving piece of it. So when I started doing what we call tribal journeys in our territory, we would go in these canoes and we'd travel to all the different tribes throughout our waterways, because we used to always say that we never had roads here before. All our roadways were waterways that we traveled on in our canoe. So when we look at those things, we refer to that as our canoes, as our snachwash, and we have no word that is any different than our vehicle. We call our vehicles snachwash because all it is a transportation for people. So when we started doing tribal journeys, a lot of people in the tribal journeys would have cedar hats, because not only did it keep the sun off, but also when it rained, you can see the weaving, the matting, the way it was. The way it was woven was almost like a roof shingle. It was layered so the water would run off and you wouldn't get your neck and your shoulders all wet, because the hats were big enough to cover not only your head, but your sort of part of your shoulder. So when we're traveling for, when I say we would travel sometimes 2 to 3 weeks on the water, going on tribal journeys to go visit other tribal societies. So a big part of that was started through an elder gentleman. He's passed away now, late Chief Frank Nelson, and another relation, Frank Brown. And they wanted to start a program for the youth that would be drug-free, alcohol-free, and bring them to a lot of the old waterways and passageways to visit some of the old families through that route. So they started doing a lot of the canoe journeys, which again had only been, I guess the last one was almost 3 years ago due to COVID, because they're such large events. There's a lot of people will attend those gatherings. So, people are looking forward to those events. And we always say that, during colonization, they banned a lot of our ceremonies and a lot of our gatherings. And, in through the 40s, 50s, 60s, that First Nations weren't allowed to have any gatherings. And here we are in 2020 to now 2022, banned from any of our cultural gatherings. So it is taking a toll on a lot of our relations, because a lot of people are struggling with not having the opportunity to have that social gathering anymore. We used to have, even on our territories, we had families get married into the powwow. So they used to have powwows here. We have tribal journeys, we have our longhouse ceremonies, we have the naming, we have the coming of age, we have memorials. None of those are happening. And it's becoming very difficult for a lot of our communities that we aren't allowed to do those events anymore. So we look at a lot of those challenges that we run into in our society, with restrictions, but we try to carry on to do a lot of the crafting pieces. I still provide, smaller groups to do making, crafting like drums and weaving, and a lot of the smaller ceremonies like the sweat lodge. We still have those events for smaller groups. But again, it is taking a toll on a lot of our people in our territory, because nobody can go to any gathering anymore. So it is definitely becoming a social issue, with a lot of Indigenous people, because that is our community events. That is our family events. That's our historical timeline. Since time immemorial, we've had those events taking place. So we made that connection to other relations, and again, marriages that were done in a traditional manner brought those families together, brought those communities together, whereas we don't see that anymore. So it is becoming a bit of a issue for a lot of Indigenous people, I guess pretty well throughout North America. But so we look at a lot of these things that have an impact, and I always tell people we have to be very, very grateful for a lot of our elders. Because again, if our elders weren't strong and held on to a lot of the teachings, like we call Shnawaya, if they weren't strong, I always tell a lot of students when I'm in the school, if our elders weren't strong, you wouldn't even know what a drum is, because those would have been banned in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, when they banned all the ceremonies. So when we bring drums into ceremonies or bring drums into schools, that's an historical event. So even when we're crafting, you wouldn't see these things in person. You might see them in a museum, but because of that continued education or continued teaching, we're able to do all these different crafts or different skills. Like Maria Sampson, you heard her in a video say, all the women in the class. And I remember when she's doing the interview, I looked over where she's doing the interview and I said, "What about me?" She goes, "Yeah, and you." Because I was the only man in the group. It was a university program. And I wanted to learn I'd seen all these beautiful hats, tribal journeys, and I'd asked a gentleman, I said, well, you know, he had a really beautiful hat. I'll show you the one I started to make similar to his. And I tried it on, it fit perfect. It was a beautiful hat. And I said, you selling this? And he said, yes, I am. And I said, oh, yeah, I'd like to buy it. He goes, yeah, I'm asking $5 for it. And I went, oh, yeah, I can buy that. But we were way, way up in a remote area of, again, the north end of Vancouver Island. And he said, well, if you go to the bank, sometimes they only allow 800 out a day. So I sat there for on 5, only allow 800. What? He said, yeah, I want 5,000 for it. And I went, so I took it off and I put it down. I went, I'm going to learn how to do that. I got to learn how to do that. Wow, I can't afford that. So when I seen the advertisement for Maria Sampson doing cedar hat weaving, I said, I'm coming in. And I remember when I got there, she said, Huampton, what are you doing here? I said, I come to learn, make cedar hat. And she said, it's a women's group. I said, and? So she looked at the teacher, and the teacher shook her head and said, I don't even want to argue with that guy. Just get him in here. But it's really beautiful because the way that Maria explained it was, if you're not in a good space, this is like a counselor. It'll tell you everything that is wrong with you. And a lot of people can't psychologically figure that out. But again, if you're having a difficult time, if you're having things that are going wrong, and you're trying to weave, nothing's going to work out for you. It'll be just a big problem. So like Maria was saying, you know, just this little piece of cedar will counsel you. It'll tell you exactly what's wrong with you, because it won't come out properly. It won't split properly. It won't twist the way that you need it. It won't look flat. And there's so many things. So a lot of times in that program, she said, if it's not going right for you, get up and go for a walk. You know, you don't want this in your relationship. You know, in some relationships, people will just sit there and bicker at each other and just make things worse. She said, don't do that. You don't want to do that with this relationship. Just say, okay, I'm taking a break. I'm going to step away. Yeah. So she'd always say, Huampton, where are you going? Oh, I know better. I'm going to walk away from this relationship. I'll come back when I'm on my head straight. Yeah, so I did a lot of walking when I was learning to weave, but it is such good medicine, you know, to be able to use the tactile pieces of it and look at it, and the smell of it is, like I will say, can you smell it? No, you can't, because we're on Zoom. But when you're weaving, the smell of this cedar is beautiful. So there's 2 types of cedar we use, is yellow and red. And again, the smell is just so fragrant. But I'm going to take a few minutes to go through a PowerPoint I put together, because again, through the slides, I'll be talking about some of the significance of what we call the cedar tree. So I'm going to share screen again, and I'll pull that PowerPoint up. Oh, where am I at here? Share screen. Oh, technology. All right. Okay, can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to play. So I'm going to talk over it. So I do a lot of work for youth programs. I've been doing it for the last 3 decades. So this is a program where we brought the students out into the forest to listen to the trees, to listen to the environment, listen to everything around them. I think in Japan, they call it forest bathing. Yeah, but it's something we in our territory do quite a bit, throughout the year, just to be in the forest with the tree-rooted relations, they call them. So this tree in the middle here, where all the students are sitting, that is one of the older growth cedar trees. Those are some of the ones that we're trying to put a moratorium on to protect them because they're cutting too many of them in our territory. And, so a lot of these old relations, they survived over 1,000 years, and why are we taking them, off the mountain? We used to always tell people in school that they'd always say, well, you guys didn't have books, you didn't know how to write, you didn't have this information. And I always tell them, you go look in a mountain. Our library's in China somewhere being made into IKEA furniture. That was our history. That tree will tell me a lot of things. The marks on that tree will tell me which tribal societies were here, which marking tells me a location of shared territory, which tells me it's a book. That's our 1,000-year encyclopedia that is being removed and nothing to replace it. This photo here again is another old growth cedar. So the big sort of bulbous piece on the left-hand side, it's sort of like a cancerous piece of the tree. But again, the value on that piece of wood is phenomenal. So woodworkers pay a fortune for these pieces of tree. So if you take a look at the tree in between the two, you'll see the man on the left in a red jacket, way on the bottom. The idea that they look at for forestry is, why would I spend all day cutting 200 little trees when I can cut one big tree and make 3 times the amount of money? So that's sort of the idea of taking these big, beautiful trees out of the forest, is because, again, the value of it and the time. This is another one here. This gentleman to the left on the bottom with a blue coat, he's sort of heading a big piece of conservation of the cedar trees, the old growth trees. They call them the elder ones, the old ones. This gentleman's name is Ken Wu, and he and the other gentleman in a red jacket, TJ Watt, started what they call Ancient Forest Alliance, which is trying to find, again, the preservation of some of this old growth forest that is still left on our island. So again, if I think of the island, when I was a child, we had probably 80% intact old growth on the island. We're at 0.1 of 1% left of the old growth left on the island here, and most of that is under government control of parks. So again, it's nice to have it, but what happened to all the old growth trees in our territory? Most of them are overseas somewhere now. This is my grandson and granddaughter. They're a little older now, but they always wanted to be in the forest with me when I was going to do works, and I appreciated the time. But as they got older, now they're working, they're doing what they want to do. But it was such a wonderful time to show them the significant piece of our culture and how to make that relationship with it. So it was wonderful that I had the time to share with them some of the teaching. They still follow some of it, but again, they've stepped into doing more things on their own. So there's the two that you've seen with the cedar, and the one on the left is the younger grandson. So these are some of the old growth trees that I would take the grandkids out to, just to go lay in the moss. And sometimes I'd go way off in the bush and just play flute, and they just go sleep in the moss, because the moss would be about 2 feet thick. So it was like a big bed for them. And I'd just tell them to go sleep in the forest, and I'd play music or take my drum and sing, because once you start singing in places like this, it sounds like a lot of people singing because of the vibration that's echoing off of all the big trees around there. The gentleman that you've seen on the video pulling that piece of bark off the tree, this is the elder here. His traditional name is Yak Kwam. So he's one of the master carvers in our territory. So he does a lot of the totem poles in our area, and he's been doing them for years. And this one here, they're refurbishing. This is an old totem pole that they are refinishing again. And it also is now in our university in our town here. they put it inside the building so it'd last longer. But again, Yat Huam has been a teacher in our territory for many, many years, teaching about the significance, and he has a lot of the different teachings about cedar and about a lot of plants around our territory. So this is the uses of some of the things that we use for the cedar, the wood itself. So we take and we split it by hand and make these what they call shakes to do the sides of a building. So this is one of the buildings on the property where I live. So 95% of all the buildings on the property are recycled material. So pretty well everything around here, even the school that I sit in, is pretty well recycled material. There's the school that I'm sitting in. So to the right, you'll see those flags. Well, that's the room I'm sitting in with the turtles behind me. So this is an outdoor school. We've been here for the Sacred Cedar Center for over 2 decades, teaching students to survive on the land and teaching about ethnobotany and traditional cultures. And for the last decade, it was a lot of international students coming here. So we'd have students from Korea and Japan and Germany and Switzerland, South America, and they would spend 15 to 20 days, doing a program here on the land. So that's we call it Sacred Cedar Center. So when we look at some of the crafts and pieces that we do, these beautiful drums are, they were commissioned by this young artist here. He's doing a lot of wonderful work in our territory as a First Nations artist. So if you ever come to British Columbia, Canada, if you land in Vancouver, you have to take a ferry to our island, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending what route you take. But they've been commissioning these young artists for some of the First Nations artwork. So again, Maynard Johnny, this young man here, had been commissioned to do all the artwork on one of the new ferries that will be transporting people from Vancouver to Vancouver Island. And these drums are made out of elk hide, but the ring inside of it is like this one here. It's yellow cedar. So this is another one I'll be making for him. And so that's another piece of the wood that we use from the cedar trees. This is an example of some of the hats that I've been making out of the cedar. So I've used different type of material for dyeing, the blacks and the reds, and traditionally a lot of it was berries that we would use for dyeing, or we would use various barks to get the different colors in the cedar itself. Another one was ochre we used for reds. A lot of the stuff that people use nowadays are contemporary clothes dye. So they dye it with different synthetic dyes. It doesn't take as long, and you can go down to the department store and pick it up instead of going to the forest trying to produce it all. This that one didn't center. I don't know. The picture jumped out of place. But this is an idea of the skill and craft of some of the weavers. This is a young lady on the north end of the island, and she does some very, very intricate work in weaving. And you can see the designs throughout the brim and how she's used different colors and different materials to weave this beautiful, beautiful hat. Again, very, very detailed, and the skill to do that weaving, it's a lot of time. Those are 2 more hats that I've done for. One was for the murdered missing women, the one on the right, and the other one was for a young lady. She wanted a black rose in her hat, so I found the dye and the colors to make that for them. These are another material. This is the bark with the inner bark in it. And traditionally they used to have these in our canoes to bail the water out. But a lot of restaurants in our area now are using more of the organic containers for holding their creamers or sugars in the restaurant. So this one was made for the elders building in our tribal kitchen to hold their creamers and sugars and little things that they want on the table. So they're made out of the actual bark and the cambium together. And I think that might have been it. Okay, escape. Boom. Stop share. Wow, I'm getting used to this stuff. Oh, I don't have to have my grandkids here helping me with the technology, because a lot of times I'm like, how do you do that? Where's the grandkids? I need a 6-year-old to figure out my technology. But not doing too bad right now, trying to figure all this technology out and how to make things work together. You know, so it's a whole new concept. But one of the other things I wanted to share when we're going through these pieces are some of the details in some of the weaving, because again, there's a lot of different forms of weaving. So if I look at this one here, you can see how detailed that weaving is in there. So a lot of these baskets, you can see them inside. So sometimes they would use cedar bark. Again, these are all natural pigments that are used to dye these. So that's the ochre. Again, that's what they call alder bark to make the black. So these are all natural colored baskets. So these ones all came from my grandma and great grandma in their time. So I've been lucky enough to hold on to these baskets. So these ones here are, I believe, around 90 years old. These old baskets they have here. So a lot of them, they would be weaving for carrying, you know, their berries or whatever they're harvesting. This one here is made more from a reed and cedar. So you see all the different dyes and stuff on there for the coloration. But if you look inside of this one, you can see how tight that is woven there. Actually, this one here, if you put water in this thing, once that reed and that cedar got wet, this would hold water. So they used to make baskets that would carry water. So when they didn't have running water, they learned how to use the reeds that grew in around the lakes and stuff and around the rivers. So 3-strand grass, snake grass, all the different grasses that grew along the river, they would take it and weave it into here with the cedar, because the cedar would bind it. But also the cedar, once the cambium got wet again, it would swell up. So the hats that we make, once they get wet, they swell up, and then that seals them from water. So these things here were able to carry water. So if I took this and went and put water in it, you still, 80, 90 years later, this thing will still retain water. So I think about the elders and the skill they had. How did they learn how to do that? So again, a lot of these old baskets, we take a look at, some of them with all these are all traditional dyes. And there's the different weave in here. There's called plating. So this is a different weave than these ones here. These ones are more of a twined, twisted weave. So they're a lot tighter. But again, a lot of the old baskets, when we use these old baskets, a lot of them are, because they've sat in storage before they were brought to us, that they're breaking and falling apart. But again, the more I learn about these baskets, like the top is fantastic yet. I'm going to be able to learn how to redo that and fix that end, and again, replace some of the pieces on that. And yeah, so we look forward to fixing some of those pieces. This is another one. Mrs. Grandma's. I never did figure out what those initials meant, but this is her shopping basket. She used to go to the market and do all her shopping and carry all her food in here. You know, so you could see how they wove all the banding. These are all cedar. These strands are cedar. They're twisted cedar. So they call it twining to make rope. I'll show you that in a minute. But again, a great piece that I hadn't seen this for a long time. And I remember seeing at Grandma and Grandpa's house. I remember seeing it at her place when she was still alive. And then it disappeared when both Grandma and Grandpa passed away. Then I remember I seen it at my parents' house. Then it sort of just disappeared. Then about 6 months ago, my brother brought it to me and said, "You're the only one that's really doing any cultural work, so we think you should have this." So they had it put away in storage, but I love all the natural colored dyes in it. It's just fantastic. So when I look at looking at dyes and looking at colors, a lot of people ask about dyeing and coloring things. And I always tell people, look at what naturally dyes and colors or stains your clothes. So blackberries. If you are ever eaten blackberries, it stains your finger. And if you get the juice on your clothes, it stains it. So that gives you black. So again, that's a really wonderful sort of relationship that you build with it. The other one is vegetables. So if you think of beets make a very beautiful red color. So you have to look at, again, berries, vegetables. The other one that they use is a thing they call lichen. So again, the greenery that hangs off the tree, some people call it old man's beard. That gives you a really nice green tinge. So there's a lot of different things that you can look at for making dyes for different colors for the material you're trying to work with. A lot of people, again, are using headbands. The other thing a lot of people are making that are weavers now, they're making grad caps, because a lot of the traditional people don't want to use the contemporary grad cap anymore. So they're making a plate with a band on it, and they're putting all the designs of their tribe, weaving it into the top of the grad cap. Then they put eagle feathers or hawk feathers on them, so it's, it signifies who they are and where they come from. But one of the other things I want to look at is you'll have to think about the tools that we use to split the cedar, to thin the cedar out. So I've put some in the water. So this is the sort of the cedar that we look at. So this little gadget here has a little razor blade on it. 2 pieces of wood. You can move this in and out to give you the width you need. You always got to make sure you know which side the sharp blade is. So that fits in like this. Then you just split it. And that gives you that width. Then to start weaving with it, then you need something sharp like this needle here. So when I was weaving, I was watching different people struggling to get thin pieces. So I looked at it and I love creating things. So I went down to the sewing shop and got darning needles, got some pieces of wood and some epoxy glue, and set the needle inside of this. So when I'm thinning it out, I can put this here. Then you can split it and make it the thickness you need, because these have to be fairly thin and pliable, or else they won't weave. If they're too stiff or not pliable enough, you won't be able to weave with them. So then you just pull it apart. So you could see the students that were from the university, they were in the forest looking at prepping this stuff. And as Maria was saying, you know, when we prep it, we leave most of the stuff that we don't use in the forest. So a lot of this stuff we'll bring back to the forest that are bits and pieces. But when you start to thin these pieces out, you have to be very careful. These needles are sharp, and you just keep thinning that piece out until it gets pliable enough that you can bend it. So there's, again, you've seen a lot of the different weaving techniques. There's some beautiful weavers on the island here. I keep trying to learn as much as I can. I try to watch as much as I can to learn these different techniques, because again, you know, some of the elders are so skillful in what they're doing and how they're making, you know, this cedar, how they're thinning it out. And I remember I sat with an elder one time where on what we call the tribal journeys, and I was watching her do the work with the cedar, and I couldn't really see how she was making that thinner. And I was looking for this piece. So I got closer and I was watching her and I was watching her, and I'm like, she doesn't have a needle. What is she doing? So when she took this piece and split it into other pieces like this, what she had was her thumbnail was long and pointy, and she just stuck her thumbnail in there and slid the thumbnail up and split that. Then I couldn't see how she was making it thin like this. And what it was she had her little nail with a long sharp point on it, and she would slide it in and pull it. So she used her thumb as the splitter and her little finger as a thinner. Whereas where we have today, we have this fancy gadget with a sharp blade on it. Then we have this piece of wood with a sharp needle on it. And again, this is the slow, methodical piece of trying to make this work, because you want to put that through there to make it thin. But when you're putting it through there, you want to push it through so it looks like you'll see a bump in there. And that's when you know that it's going to be thin enough to be able to weave with. And it takes hours and hours and hours to prep this to make it usable. I've seen people waste so much just trying to make strips to weave with. So if we go back to where they were showing a video of the elder pulling that cedar bark off the tree, and this is the piece, the cambium, they were peeling off. But again, one of the teachings that we have to acknowledge and recognize is when we're taking that bark off of the tree, we only take 10% of the overall diameter. Because you got to remember, this is the bloodline of the tree. This is how the water gets up and down into those branches. So like us as human beings, we have veins in our body. We have different veins here. Well, this is the same thing. This is how the water gets into the tree. So if you take more than 10% off that tree, that's restricting the amount of moisture that needs to get up to the top of that tree. You know, then that tree basically struggles and ends up dying, because especially if you do it during the heat of the summer, it doesn't have enough time to recover from losing so much moisture. The other thing that happens is a lot of people say, well, does it damage the tree? Well, if you do it properly, no, it doesn't. Because again, if you take 10% of that over the next 3 to 5 years, it's like human skin. You know, if you cut yourself, you get a scab on there. Well, the same thing happens is that moisture starts to solidify and becomes a hard pitch. And that will then seal back over like it does to your skin. And again, that skin regrows itself back in. So it won't have bark on it, but it will seal that tree and that water will run back up and down again. So, Grandpa and I used to always say, it's no different than a human being. Many of the pieces are the same. They interact the same. So when we look at these things, there's, all these pieces that we use. We try to make use of everything that we have. Every once in a while, if we end up with a lot of bits and pieces like this, we end up with this time of the year when it's really cold and we need to start a fire in a house. Well, that's our fire starter. So it gets used for all kinds of things. And so when we look at, there's so many different things that we look at, but one of the things that a lot of people ask about is making rope. So traditionally, we didn't have synthetic rope. A lot of the times we had different barks. Stinging nettle was used as rope. So we had a lot of different pieces of material that we would use for rope. So again, the bark was one of the pieces that were added to stinging nettle. So when we would make rope, we would have to, again, because they would sometimes tie the canoes off, or they'd use it to lash all the big beams in the big buildings. So you take the two pieces like this, and all you do is twist them one way. So again, a lot of this stuff is really tactile. You have to really hold things. So you have to become ambidextrous at holding things. So you want to twist it like that. You can see it's twisting. Then you want to take the next one and do the same thing, twist it. And what you want to do is when you're twisting them, you basically start to bind those two together. And that starts to make your rope. So if you bind this together and make a thick rope, this would be just as strong and as any synthetic rope, and it's just the cedar bark. So that's one of the crafts that a lot of people are starting to learn how to do. But again, there's so many different bits and pieces to how to do things. The other one we're seeing a lot of people do because, when we do, graduations, when we do celebrations, when we have memorials for funerals, everybody wants to make flowers, for those loved ones. So a lot of people now are making, these tulips. They're making bouquets of roses. One of the other ones I like to show people is you can have a very big flower, or you can have a tiny little one. So I'm going to show you how to do this one very quickly. Because again, when you start to look at these small little crafts, they're very meticulous in how you put them together. They're very difficult to hold on to, especially when you got big fat hands like mine. And I learned this from an elder woman on what they call the west coast of our territory. And I would always watch her at craft fairs doing this. And I finally got brave enough and I went over and I'd asked her, Auntie, how do you do that? She just sort of looked at me and I said, okay, I'll be back in a little while. So I went and got some snacks and some coffee and brought it back to her. Then she had me sit down and she showed me how to do this. So you're just folding this over and over and over and over again. Then you let it go like this. Then you take that and you pull it inward. So there is, where is it? your tiny, tiny little rose. You see it? So that gives you an example how small that is. Here's a pencil eraser. It's even smaller than that. So a lot of people now are making these very intricate, small little pieces because they're making earrings out of them. And yeah, people love them, you know, because there's such a small, little delicate piece. And I had one lady said, well, could you make me a dozen roses? And I said, okay, well, do you want large roses or small roses? She said, well, can you make a small bouquet of roses? So I said, sure, I could do that. So I made her a small bouquet of roses, and it was about that big. The total was about this big round, so almost the size of my thumb. And that was 12 roses. So when I gave it to her, I said, there's your dozen roses. And she went, what? And she looked at it and she's like, what? And she took her glasses and, whoa, those are, yeah. So she was really enthralled by it. But again, you know, the intricacy of delicacy, the delicate pieces of that is just like this. You know, over 100 years ago, our elders were doing small, intricate pieces of weaving. So when we look at those things, you know, we look at how they're connected together. I'm going to get two more pieces. So there's a lot of different ways to do the crafting pieces. They say it's a little harder when you're over there, you're in Zoom land. I can't really help you. But again, you know, when we start to make different roses, different flowers, I'll tell everybody, you know, make that. Okay. I'll say, okay, it looks like a K. So you make that piece. Looks like a K. So what happens now is you take that, once you get your K in there, and you twist it. Then you take this piece and go under. Then you take that piece, go under, and then you twist it again. And you're just going to be wrapping that and twisting it. And again, this is only one way. There's about 6 different ways that you can do these types of flowers. The other thing that's really beautiful is now we're dyeing the different colors and adding them in, so you can make black and red flowers or green and white, or you know, different types of colors you add to it. Then you just keep twisting that around until you come to this. That's how you make that flower. Then you just take a piece of bark, wrap it around. And that's what you use to tie it off. So that's that piece. I had one more piece. I'm trying to think. Hold on 1 second. I'll go grab it. Here's another piece I started making. I found it very interesting because I'd end up making all these little roses. So a lot of women with really long hair, now you put your hair bun through here and then you tie your hair bun up, and this sits on top of your hair bun on your head. So it's all these little roses. Now I'm teaching more people to make those. It takes a little more work because you're lacing and tying everything up. So that's another little craft that we make. One of the things that we look at is having documentation like this. It really helps us because, again, these are universities that are making up these documentation, these books. But the thing about it is it really helps because they write everything down. They're very meticulous about putting everything down in information about how it was traditionally done. So I was, grateful that we have some literature out there, because a lot of the stuff that we've learned over the years in our territory, a lot of it's referred to as what they call oral history. So a lot of our elder people never wrote things down. My late mother was a great one for knowledge, and every time I went to see her and ask her about things, and if I had a piece of paper or if I had my phone to record something, she would just sit there with her hands like that. And I'd say, well, you gonna say anything? What if you lose that paper? Yeah. What if that thing dies on you, that whatever that is, that thing you talk to? What if that takes it, or somebody takes it, or it quits working on you? Then what? And I say, what are you saying? She goes, out in the Siam and I'm Amish sauce. Out in the Siam and smashed and I'm Amish and the Siam out in the sauce, out the sauce. She said, if you lose that paper and that machine quits on you, and if you don't remember that in your mind, how are you going to remember it? She said, I'm going to tell you and you'll remember it. I'm going to show you and you'll see how things are done. Because if you lose this thing, you depend on it too much. And how many people have, had their dog eat their homework or take their homework? Then what? You're chasing your dog around the yard trying to collect your homework. So my mom, she wouldn't let me record her. She wouldn't let me write things down. And she really was adamant for me, to learn and hold on to it, to a lot of that teaching, a lot of Shnawaish. So we try to hold on to a lot of the cultural pieces. And in this home, I've been very, very lucky to have so many elder teachers, come through this home and teach with us. We had 2 years ago, we had a master's program in our language, but they did a theatrical play. We got a big room in the back here, and they built a theater in there and did all the play in our Hulkaminam language. And the elders, it was so beautiful because, some of those elders have gone now, but it was beautiful to have them sit there and be very comfortable in this home, and to watch so many of the young people doing those plays and just in our language, no English. So it's been an honor to have this home. They say you can see a little bit, there's still some of our language up on the wall. We have some of the written pieces around in the building here of language. And we try to teach, when I'm teaching classes like this class this evening with each and every one of you, I try to use our language to reference things, to help not only you to learn, but for me to remember. Because again, we have to continue to keep practicing and keep sharing a lot of the language, because the things are changing, and if we don't keep teaching it, who's going to carry on with this great history we have of Indigenous people? I hope that was enough information. Maybe we'll leave a bit of time if anybody has any questions before we carry on.
Absolutely. Wow, that is so, I was so intrigued that I was just listening, and it reminded me a lot of in the area where I am, as I mentioned, southern part of Arizona, with the Tohono O'odham people, that they have, they do the weaving basketry. And it's beautiful, intricate work, and the different elements that they use, in the environment that's here in the desert. They use the reeds and the devil's claw, and they have these beautiful, intricate details that they do within their basketries, and master weavers that have beautiful work out there. And so that's what it reminded me of when you were talking about the different colors that were in the baskets that you showed us. And thank you, Fred, for sharing that with us. I think it's a beautiful tradition that we have. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is the type of, this is a Tahana Atham necklace that they have, and one that we have a local store here, but that's part of the reeds and the materials that they use, the yucca plant, that we utilize down here, to make those. And I can't think of all the other elements they use, but it's just a beautiful work that they do, and the different intricate details, designs that they have on creating these baskets, and how they start from the center. There's a whole story behind the basket on how they create it and make it. And you have to have, they say, the elders here say, have good thoughts, think good thoughts when you're making that, just like you said, when you're working with the cedar, and that if it becomes complicated or starts not coming the way it needs to go, then you have to step away to kind of bring your mind back into focus, on what you're creating. And so the same thing, and I think that that's the same with a lot of, our Native communities, that any type of intricate work that we have. For my people, we do a lot of beadworking. My people are Plains people. And so we have a lot of intricate beadwork that we do. And I learned it from a few relatives when I was actually in college. And then my aunt started showing me different designs over the years, my dad's sister. And so, and my uncle even made me a loom, handmade loom that I utilized, that my aunt used. So the same type of loom that she has, it's not the regular kind that you can just go to the store and buy one, just those different tools. It brought a lot of those memories back, and it's really nice to see that. So thank you, Fred. It's really good. So I'll allow some, if anybody else has some comments they would like to share, please do so.
I'll just have to go down there, bring my material, and we can practice with your elders and bring all the different colors that will dye, and we'll go do some weaving with you. Make some new designs in your mandalas. Yes, any more questions?
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, Zach.
Yeah.
Mr. Roland, I'd like to thank you for your time and the stories that you've provided and your perspective on just everything. I wrote down many different notes on as you were speaking. One of the things I noticed, though, as you were describing the wood, the cedar, the bark, and the basket weaving, one of the things I noticed was an elder used carving out the wood pole or the totem pole. I was just wondering if you could add a little bit more history to that. Is that hand carving? The type of tools that he may use? I'm utterly curious and fascinated by that. So it's just, wondering if you could speak.
Yes, I forgot to show you a piece. So traditionally, a lot of the tools we had to use with the resource that was around here. I'm just going to share a little bit about cedar weaving. So again, the elder would always say the animals are going to provide you with the tools you need. So this is one here. This is the one that we used to use for taking this and splitting the cedar. So it's like a blade.
Oh.
Yeah. So that again is the part of the leg that comes off from that ball joint from the leg to the hip on an animal. So you'd make a blade out of it. The other one we use is this one here. This is the shin bone. So the shin bone on like the elk, the bear, not so much a deer. They're too porous, but the elk and the bear are mostly used. Moose, they have a very heavy, solid piece in the front. So that's solid. So you could make needles out of it. You can make spear points out of it. But again, that is going to be very hard. So a lot of the points and a lot of the pieces that we used, again, instead of having this metal piece with the wood, I would cut a piece out of here and make a needle. So I make a lot of needles for people that want to use traditional tools. Then we get animals. We go sometimes in the forest and look for them and find the pieces that we could use. But these ones don't work really well because you could see how porous that is here. So that'll start breaking up.
Okay.
Because again, it has air pockets in it, so it'll break. But this will be good enough for splitting. Then if you want to thin it, then you take, because that goes up into the leg piece, that goes up into the shoulder. So you want to have that shin piece because it is solid. So a lot of the tools, the older tools for carving, so we have knives and stuff now and adzes, and they call it the contemporary beaver, the chainsaw. You know, a lot of people use all these contemporary tools, but in the traditional times of carving, it was mostly obsidian. So it was a stone that we traded with the interior people that was used here. There's a little bit of obsidian here, not much, or flint stone, they call it. So they would make all the spear points, arrowheads. So a lot of those would be carved and flinted off to make a sharp point. So if you're good at flinting, you could make a really sharp blade like this that would be just as sharp as this. And that's what they used to use for carving. Other parts of it that they would do, especially if it's a larger pole, like our traditional canoes, like our large canoes, because again, it's a lot of carving. So what they would do is they would take the center of the log, say this was the log, if you're making a canoe or a big totem pole, you would find the piece where that needs to go down quite a ways. So if this was a canoe and you had to go down this way, you would dig the center of it out, and then you'd start a fire in there. And you'd burn that and keep adzing and picking at it until that to burnt down far enough, and then you'd put water on it, stop it, clean it all out, and then that would give you a lot more softer material to dig out of there than it would be the hard wood.
I'm tracking.
Oh, yeah. So if you had big pieces of a cedar log and you had to go, say that was a totem pole, and you had a piece that had to go deep in here, you basically, that would be laying like that. You'd start a fire, let that fire build and keep chipping away at it, let the fire burn it, and then it becomes ash, and it's way easier to carve than trying to get solid wood out.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Yeah, I'll use like a chisel or something, but just that technique to carve that's I couldn't even conceptualize that.
So a lot of it is, again, it's a skill, because you think about dry cedar and you're putting a fire in it, you know how fast cedar burns. So you have to really be careful of how much of a fire you're using, because if it gets away on you, basically it'll burn everything and you'll have nothing. So you really have to, it's like a controlled fire burn. So you have to know how much coal to put in there, how much to allow it to burn out, because if it carries too far or it goes up a grain, it'll look like you've taken that fire out, but there's a strand of maybe pitch that runs up a grain, and that would go down, catch fire, and go underneath, and you wouldn't even see it because it's covered. Then all of a sudden you'll see smoke somewhere else, and you'll go like, what's the smoke doing over there? Then you realize it burnt up the log. So a lot of different skills around knowing the grain, how are you carving, which way is the grain going. Again, yeah, there's so many pieces to those logs when you're looking at them. And again, where was a branch? You know, where does that go? How does that fit? Yeah, it makes a big difference, especially when you have an elder like Yat Kwam. He'll look at a log and tell you exactly where pieces will go, because that's going to be easier to carve. And they always try to find trees that have no branches in them, because if you know, if you've carved anything and if you have really nice straight grain, then a knot, you know, your knife just won't go through that. It'll just dull your knife right up. So you want to have nice clean wood pieces when you're carving, like this one here. This is a paddle I'm working on. So this is what they call the heart of it. So you want to make sure that you're at the heart of it. That's a strong piece of it. And then you want to make sure, because this is going to be used, I got a canoe here that's 36 feet long. So this is the skipper canoe, the skipper paddle. So you need a wide base so you can turn it and move that big canoe when you're paddling. So again, this is the heart of the log here. And that's a strong piece. And you want to make sure, because you can see there's no knots in it. It's clean wood, and it makes it easier to carve. And if you have power tools, it doesn't matter. Your power tools will push through all that stuff. But if you don't have power tools, yeah, it makes it a lot more difficult to start maneuvering and carving that piece of wood. And you have to know which way the grain's going. Because when I first started carving with Uncle, I was pushing too far and I would catch the grain and it would go too far. And I'd go, whoa, oh, can I glue that back in, Uncle? I think I cut it too far. And he's like, no, you can't. Okay, we're gonna have to change the design because now I got a big gouge here, you know, so we can't glue that back in. So you really have to know the grain, because when your knife is going, if you have nice knives, yeah, it'll cut quite a ways in. Yeah, and it's the same thing when you're weaving. You know, you have to know how to separate it, how to split it, where's the good pieces, where's the knots in the bark. Yeah, so it's a lot of skills to learn in it.
Awesome, thank you for
Yes.
that. It
So,
adds a lot of perspective into, because I love wood carving and I haven't done very much of it, but I just wanted to ask you to see what you thought, so thank you.
yes, you have to come down the island and come and work on a big canoe or a big totem pole.
That literally sounds like a dream.
Yes, yes. Yeah, because we have 2 poles out there we're working on, and we're looking at getting a big log to make a large canoe. We want to do a 50-foot canoe, a big seagoing canoe. So our people used to travel up to 6 months. They would travel from Vancouver Island and they'd go out past, if you know, Seattle, and they would paddle as far as California.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa. Just, I'm
Yeah.
assuming along the coast.
Along the coast. Yeah, and then they'd go up the Columbia River, visit tribes up there. So, you know, in around the 16, 17, into the early 1800s, they would travel up to, you know, 6 months a year, just trading and exploring.
Oh my gosh. And I'm assuming when they were traveling and on the in the various boats, did they have maps, or was it they were just following the stars? Or I'm assuming then if it was just following the land of the coast.
Well, and that's the thing that I try to teach a lot of students. I said, take in consideration, you look at the landscape. We can look at a topical view of the landscape and say, okay, here's the landscape. Okay, well, again, you'll pull up a chart with the tides on it. You'll pull up a chart with the weather on it. You'll pull up a chart with the nautical miles on it. You'll pull up a chart, and all these things are provided on the internet or wherever you're going to get it. I said, now step back 200 years. There's no nautical charts. There's none of this stuff. So a lot of it is, again, navigation through the solar system, but looking at tides. Where's the tide going? How is it moving? Is that cloud representing land base? Or if I don't see clouds, I'm going to the ocean then, you know, because there's no clouds over there. You know, so again, which way's the wind blowing? Like Grandpa could go to the ocean here, as we're kids, and he would just stand on the beach and suck the air, and then he'd tell us what the weather's going to do. It was nice and sunny, but he'd say, Awat lim siam, ti titan is squald and an image. Oh, company kach and siam. In a little while, it's going to change. So you can't take your canoe out. We'd like, right, Grandpa, we're going out. Yeah. 2 hours later, yeah, wind was blowing, the water's chopping. Yeah. So they knew all of that just by the smell of the air.
That is
So we always
amazing.
tell people, you know, when you're trying to learn that skill, make sure there's nobody in front of you that is really stinky and smelly because it might give you the wrong indication. Yeah. And that's the beautiful part of it is I always tell students we're losing our magic. Yeah, unless it's on Disney, or if it's on Harry Potter, or it's on the Avengers, you don't believe in magic. But a lot of our indigenous people had magic. You know, they had abilities to foresee things. They had shape-shifting abilities. They had all these skills, how to talk to plants, how to talk to animals. Yeah, and the only animals we talk to are angry human beings. We forgot to, how to relate to all the natural beings. So those are some things I'm trying to teach more the kids of, yeah, let's step away from that. Because like I was saying, we're stuck in this. And one of the things I always teach students is, remember, Grandma Google and Grandpa Yahoo only know what people tell them.
Mhm.
Is it true? Because a lot of times, no, it isn't. So this is not the way that we should be learning. And again, if you want to learn more about, especially the old ways, find, elder people, find people that still are willing to share the knowledge, because yeah, it's such a different world. Like when I grew up and, an elder would knock on my door, we'd open the door. Oh, come and that was how we reacted to an elder coming to our house. Open the door, come sit down. Here, you want some food? You want some tea? Get them seated, get them comfortable and give them, something to snack on, and wait for them to say, I'm here for this. I come to ask you to do this. Nowadays, and that's a hard thing I see with a lot of people, is an elder goes to somebody's house and knocks on the door, and people open the door and go, what do you want? What do you mean, what do I want? Shit, I'm going to come in and take whatever I want now. You're holding me outside? Come on. No. Yeah, so we're losing those ways. We're losing that respect for some of the really wonderful knowledge keepers. Yeah, so it's keep learning about how it was and try to use those things again. It's not like, Grandpa, can you come and do this for me? The craziest thing the other day, somebody sent me an email asking me to do prayers at a sweat lodge for them, but they had an Emmy-con with somebody offering tobacco. I'm like, what? No, come and see me and give me freaking tobacco. I don't want to see this on a computer. Jesus. So again, we're getting disconnected from so much of it. So yeah, so I'm glad you get to come and listen a little bit.
And I very much appreciate you sharing everything. I do agree in some capacity, this world is being consumed by technology, and trying to find a connection, trying to find a meaningful purpose here is, it's difficult. And I see a lot of the young and, even my same aged friends, there's a lot of psychological problems, I think, that go in the mind.
Go in the forest. Do you need Ritalin? No, you need to go in the forest and sit by the river. You don't need Ritalin. You don't need, you're not crazy. You just need to get out of the crazy and go to the comfort of what it was. Get in that place where it disconnects you from what they're telling you are. Because that's all you need. Is a lot of it is just, we're labeled by so much of society that really doesn't really understand. So yeah, come and visit us.
What's the school that you name, or what is
The
it?
Sacred Cedar Center is where we're doing a lot of the teaching. And a lot of people say, oh, what's your website? Oh, I don't. You come and find me. People around the world can come and find me. You live, not far away. You'll come find me. There is no website. I got a phone number, but yeah, we just got a Facebook. So if you look in Facebook, it says Sacred Cedar Center. But again, that's the one thing that I look at is, there's so much, that we can, allow people to come in and share with us. But yeah, am I going to waste all my time on the internet trying to find people? No, people will find us. And for almost 2 decades, we haven't had a website. And we get busy with people looking for, again, culture, looking for understanding of who they are. Yeah. So there's some of the things that I was just sharing that teaching with a wonderful couple that come here to do some work today. And they're asking about spirit. And I said, I'll tell you a story that was told to us, about what we call Sali. They say that the creator, Tzitzel Siem, created all things being, everything around. Then Tzitzel Siem said, I'm going to bring the last part of creation to this place. That'll be the 2-legged people. But we have to give them a special gift, something that will be just theirs. So the creator said, well, we have to leave it somewhere, until they're ready for it. So Yahweh, the eagle, come forward and said, give it to me, I'll take care of it. So the eagle flew to Grandmother Moon and put it on the moon, came back, told the creator, I left that special gift for the humans up on Grandmother Moon. And Squatzali was flying around and landed on Tzitzel Siem's shoulder and started speaking. Squatzali is a hummingbird. And if you listen to a hummingbird, they're you'll hear them talking. So he's telling the creator, you can't leave it on Grandmother Moon. And he said, why not? Because the humans will go there and destroy it. Oh. So Kaltalamus, the killer whale, come out of the ocean, said, give it to me, I'll take care of it. And she went back in the ocean, come back and said, I left it at the depth of the ocean where it's safe. Hummingbird flew around again, started talking to Tzitzel Siem and told Tzitzel Siem, you can't leave it in the ocean because humans will destroy it. They're going to destroy the ocean. So again, Squatzali flew around, landed on the creator's shoulder. The creator said, so Squatzali, you seem to understand a lot of this. Where should we leave this special gift for the human beings? And Squatzali started talking again. And the creator said, Yeah, all the other animals were waiting and they said, where are we going to leave the special gift for the humans? What did Squatzali say? He said, put that spirit in the humans. Humans won't never look inside themselves for their spirituality. They'll go look everywhere else. It was one of the oldest teachings that they share with us. Remember, you take care of your spirit before you go do some other work. And that's the thing I find in our contemporary times of so many people lost, so many people disconnected. They forgot their old ways, and looking for spirituality. Well, it's in you. You just got to remember where it is. So I'll say if a hummingbird comes and talks to you, he's telling you, take care of your spirit. So those are some of the teachings we have from our elders of, their relationship to, the natural beings, the eagles and the whales and the hummingbirds, Yeah. And that's why I always say that a lot of people, they always say, what's your spirit animal? Oh, I'm a wolf. Oh, I'm this, I'm a killer, I'm this. No, just be Squatsali. Just be a little bird, because you might know a lot more things than other things. But again, you want to look at that, of that identification. And it was one of the greatest, stories I recall of our elders about Squatsali. No, I always say you take care of your spirit, because it's in difficulties, in times of difficulty, we forget about it. So there's your story of taking care of yourself. So in our language, we say, I tape katanasiam sias. They know I done a squala I claim a qualmochanish no wire in siam. We say thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the story, because again, it helps, for you to remember things. And we always say a lot, take care of yourself. And that's the only thing that we can leave with you, because there's so much, that each and every one of us have to do and carry on to survive in the madness of our world. Yes. A lot of times we when we say thank you, we always hold our hand like this. And a lot of people would always say, well, why do you do that? And the way the elder told us is, when you hold your hand, you're saying, now I receive everything from you. So I thank you. I take everything in now. I thank you for your time, for your listening, and your presence in this wonderful evening. I even have audience here in my building, people watching, listening. So it's great to share with such a place far off, about our, they call it the tree of life. I will say, if you ever watch the movie Avatar, they have a tree of life. And if you come to our forests and bring you to these old trees, you'll see the spirit dropping out of it. Just such a beautiful place. So come visit sometime.
Hello, Mr. Roland. I just want to say thank you very much for teaching us these lessons, and what you use cedar for, and how it's created and made into such beautiful pieces that have you not just carrying the baskets, but also in beauty as well. There are things that I think about and that I've heard about from different tribes, and how they create baskets, and they use the natural materials around them to create pieces to sustain themselves in their community. I absolutely enjoyed your presentation. So from me to you, thank you very much for the reminders of how we need to look around us and take a break from our busy, or my busy life, and you are correct. Once we step away and we go out to where the water runs, and where the wind is blowing against the trees, and feeling that sand in between your toes and your hands, it is a refresher. It brings us back to who we are, and makes us whole again. So thank you for those your traditional stories, and I loved all the pieces that you shared this evening. And my daughter was listening as well, and she's like, I love his presentation, because you can tell that you actually enjoy what you do, and that you are fully welcoming your to others, and your teachings. You're excited about them, and that is what is important to our kids. When you do a presentation, are you enjoying it? Do you enjoy what you do? And she picked up on that, and she's like, wow, he really likes what he does. And she goes, hey, he's a really good presenter. I like him. And, she's a youth. So you do have her attention. And so I imagine your youth around you and your kids around you will benefit from your teachings as well. So thank you very much. And yeah.
Uh-huh. You always say that when you go to the river or to the ocean, the way that our elders taught us is you're just a piece of energy. So like when you reboot your computer, you're just a human computer. You need to reboot yourself, recharge yourself. And that's where you go to the forests. And I always tell people when they're going through a lot of difficult times, go to the ocean or go to the river and take your feet off, because now you're plugging in, and just lay on the bank and put your feet in the water, because again, that energy is circulating and clearing your body out again. So there's a lot of places we go here to just go lay in the forest or lay along the beach.
Yeah.
And yeah, we try to get more groups to do that, or go into the cold water and reset your internal system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have traditions like that too down here in Arizona. And, we have like a snow bath.
Oh, yes.
That renewal.
Yeah.
We have our rivers as well. And our rivers, and oceans are filled with minerals. So when you put your legs in, you step out and you feel fresh and smooth and re-energized. You're so correct.
Well, I know when I was in Germany, they asked if I practiced Wim Hof. And I said, excuse me, Wim Hof, das ist alles gut. Ja, es ist Indianer. I said, Wim Hof. I said, no, we've been doing this way before Wim Hof. We've been going to the rivers and the oceans and swimming in cold water, because again, it recharges your whole system. And they say when we do it here, we walk in and especially if you have to break the ice and walk in, it's even better. Then you sink into the water. And then grandma used to tell us, she'd always tell you, I know start low. You sit in the water and let go of those things. And she would make us sit in the water, in the freezing water, just with our eyes above the water, watching. Then she'd tell you to stand up. Then the cold air hits you. Then you got to go back in the water. So she'd make you do it 4 times. But one of the most important parts of that, I remember, and we still do it, is you back out of the water, because you're pushing everything in the water. You're saying, please take all this from me, because I don't need it anymore. And then you would walk until you got back on the shoreline, because grandma would say, if you turn around, that will come right back on you again. You walk away from it, leave it there. So there's a lot of the different traditions we still try follow out here. But the biggest problem is people are building and developing in a lot of the areas where our traditional ceremonies used to take place. So more and more things we got to work on finding those placements. So someday you guys will come and visit our beautiful island.
Absolutely. We need to do an AIEA cultural trip.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Take your education center down here and we'll put you on a big canoe and we'll go out surviving on the land.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yes.
We'll elbow Kim.
Yes. Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, you enjoy, and like say, it was such a pleasure, Kimberly, and thank you so much for the invite. And like I say, a lot of the stuff I learned about Cedar and keep learning about Cedar. Leonard Tiger Williams always says, yeah, I taught him everything I know. I said, really? Huh? No, didn't I teach you that? We always joke about that. He's like, no, I taught you. No, I think I taught you about that.
He just texted me that too. He said, I taught him everything I know. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So he lives north, quite a way north of where I live. So he's with a tribe called the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe, and they're quite a ways north from us. But yeah, I get to see him in the cities, like either in Vancouver or Victoria, and we sit down. And again, he's the one that taught me actually about these 6-strand tulips. So, you know, it's wonderful to sit with so many craft people and learn. And like I say, you know, the elder woman that taught me about, you know, these small little roses, you know, she's in the West Coast, more north, I guess be north south of us. So yeah, I try to sit with as many elder people as I can to get some skills and remember things, because a lot of the stuff Grandpa used to always say, you're not you, you're thousands of years old. So when I look at it scientifically, you know, looking at the history we take through cell memory, you know, there's a program I teach out here at the university when we were teaching on deja vu. And I would teach you about your lineal connections and where that deja vu happen. You know, so yeah, but it's all old teachings. Like Grandpa and me used to always say, there's nothing new. It's all already there. There's always just pieces added to it. So you look at the core of what it is. Well, it's still the old ways it was. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's excellent. That's something that we try to do here,
Mm.
Arizona Indian Education Association, by teaching cultural classes, because we don't have, I mean, there are communities around here, but in our area, we have urban areas
Mhm.
where community is not as close knit. I mean,
Yeah.
there are tribal communities around us, but when you get in the city, you kind of lose that connection with
Mm.
your relatives and
Mhm.
your neighbors. So that's something that we try to do with AIEA and teaching our educators as well, and letting
Mm.
them know what's available out to them. So
Mhm.
yeah, so thank you very much for sharing. We appreciate it.
Yes, the whole urban thing. Well, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, one time, you know, I'll have to take a trip and go down to Arizona, and you know, we always say, "Clé out in the machs and in a siam and a kolmach." I have to go poke my nose around and see what's going on down there.
All right, well, keep in touch.
Yes, because we're losing a lot of our indigenous people to the urban sort of setting, and we're disconnecting. But yeah, maybe one day because I love traveling, love it, and I miss it so much, because they say last 2 decades, that's all I did was travel around the world, bringing kids to mostly hunting gather societies, indigenous cultures around the world. So a lot of South America, Asia, West Indies, Caribbean. Yeah. So yeah, miss those places. Oh, yeah. But yeah. So definitely, maybe I'll take a trip down there and come visit all of you.
All right, Kim,
Yeah, set it up.
I'm out of here. Hey.
Get your
Yeah.
private plane to pick me up.
Absolutely. We're going to have to get you all set up to come and join us. Maybe even we have our cultural youth camps that we do every summer. And we just recently started our winter youth camps that we do in the winter time, so that we can have this time of where we can talk about our winter stories and share about those traditional teachings with our students and within the state as well. Of course, we're meeting virtually right now, but our summer camps, we usually meet in person before the pandemic hit. And our students just learned so much traditional knowledge about the different uses of the environment. And our camps are called Protecting Our Land. And we called it that because it's at one of our youth conferences, we had questions that came and arose from the students that attended that conference. And during that time, in 2016 is when the No DAPL movement came, and they wanted to understand more about what treaties were and why the Standing Rock Sioux tribe protected those lands and the waters there, and what did that mean? Because within our state here in Arizona, we don't have a lot of treaty tribes, and so I'm very familiar with it coming from Oklahoma, because that's nothing but treaty tribes, you know, we have in that area. So it was kind of a culture shock when I came out west, seeing
Mhm.
that a lot of the people and the tribes people out this way really didn't understand what the treaties were and what that really meant. And so a lot of the students at our conference was asking, well, why is it important? What is the treaty and what does that stand for? And so from their questions and inquiries, we created this unique cultural camp that we now put on for them every year. And it's specifically inviting presenters and invited guests to come and talk to our students. In the same time of how you mentioned about talking to your elders, we do bring our elders in and they talk to the students and they share that traditional knowledge about whatever the theme is for that particular camp and event. And so it's really unique on, in that aspect. And so, we invite anyone to come in and do presentations for us. And so we may be reaching out to you and let's see if I get this right. I was taking notes just as Zach was saying, he was taking notes. Yeah, I was taking notes too. Weumpton. Did I say that
Yes.
correctly?
Yes.
So we, that's one of the things that my elders taught me in the Kiowa tribe, of our traditional names that we have. And each tribe's different and unique. I'm actually married out west to a Navajo man, Dene man. And for them, they don't share out their traditional names to people in public. But for us, that's what we're known by, and that's what we were called. And I remember working with my tribe, with our elders, and told them what my name was because I became the director there. And a lot of the elders really scolded me and got on to me, and they said, "That's not who you are." And they called me by my Indian name, by my Kiowa name. They said, "This is who you are. This is how I know you. This is how I know your family." And so they would always call me by my traditional Kiowa name. And so, little things like that. And that's why I picked up on the language, as Esther mentioned, living in an urban setting. And in Oklahoma, we have that checkerboard effect, what happened with the Dawes Act and the Lati era and the allotments that took place, so that our we don't have reservations. We just pretty much have jurisdictions in the area. So, just a certain boundary that we know, but our neighbor could be non-native or non-indigenous. And so, we learned together, and a lot of the non-natives learned a lot of our language. But, so I learned from my elders when I worked there, and I was very fortunate. I heard a lot of the story, what you were sharing with your people, and the same sense with our people. We followed the migration of the buffalo. And so we utilized every part of the animal. We didn't waste one part of it. You were showing the tools that you use the same way that our people utilize those tools, with the cup, and the stomach of the buffalo was actually the water bag that we used to carry the water in. And the horns became the cups. The bones became knives and spoons and different things, of that nature, and different parts of the buffalo that we utilize, because the buffalo is one of our sacred animals, that we utilize certain parts of that within our own ceremonies that we had. And as you stated, and that's pretty much like that with a lot of tribes, that, those ceremonies are leaving us, those elders who knew those songs, the ways and how those ceremonies are done, they're leaving us without, and our younger generations are not wanting to learn that. And so that's a sad part about it. But it's good that there's people out there like you, and a lot of tribes, across Indian country, that are willing to share that knowledge and share out to our youth and our children and our students. And that does intrigue them, just like Esther said with her daughter. My son was on last night, and he heard the stories from the Dene winter stories, just really intrigued by what they have. But so it's that exchange, that cultural exchange that we have among each other, that really makes us a rich people, because we have that knowledge. Just as you said, we retain it. It's not something we write down, or that we can put on the computer and then your computer crashes, then you lose everything, like your mom told you. And so, we have a lot of ways of how we recorded our history. My people, we drew calendars, and these different pictures, depicted what happened the whole year. And so, we learned how to read those and how we recorded those certain things and what certain symbols meant that are special to us and unique to our people, that we understand what it states and what it says. And so I just really enjoyed this presentation. It really inspired me and brought a lot of those teachings that I was brought up with, and what my elders, what I've learned later in life and still learning. Life's a journey that we still learn, and it's never too late to understand and to gain that knowledge. And so, you have to have that passion and desire to want to learn that and to speak your language. We have over 570 identified tribes, but there's so many more peoples out there who have that language that's instilled within us, just like you said. So it's a time to refresh our spirit. And that's what reminded me when you said go into the forest and things. My father-in-law is always telling me, so he somehow knows this, and he's always telling my husband, she needs to go home to Oklahoma. That air needs to welcome her back, and so she can be refreshed, refresh her spirit. And that's what it is. Certain spaces, when I go home, I go because that's what it does for me. And so it's unique on how your mind comes back into perspective and to focus for those things. And so, but thank you, for sharing your knowledge with us, and for willingly, showing us and teaching us your way of life. It's unique, and it's very beautiful. So aho.
Oh, aye. Thank you so much. And like say, if you invite me out, I just got to bring another cap, and that's it. I don't need anything else. Hi. Well, have a good evening. Blessings to each and every one of you. And I look forward to maybe one day we will meet in person and go stand in a river somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Roland.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye from BC.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.